day! Huh? No!
Hello lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, welcome back to another video. It's been a while since we've had a garbage day, and now that I've settled into the new place, I will be aiming to release one of these every month going forward, and it will be replacing a retrospective. So there will be 3 retros and 1 taking out the trash each month going forward. If I do manage to get far enough ahead, as I hope to, then these will go back to being extra videos on Thursdays like I used to do. However, for now, it is what it is. With all that out the way, let's find out if Saints Row's Reboot is any better in 2024. As always, we're going to start with the good. Upon jumping into the game, you'll notice it has a very bright and very vibrant color palette, and even though that's become more common in games again, it's still something I will always appreciate. The game's graphics are also pretty damn good, especially in motion. It has a cartoony look to it, but in a way that is fitting, and it's not too overbearing. Characters do have exaggerated proportions, but it's nothing that feels inappropriate for the franchise as a whole. The character creator itself is pretty damn amazing, even if some of your options are a little bit simple out the gate. And that's because you need to play to unlock more as you go, and I don't mind that. One thing I absolutely adore is the fact you can have prosthetic legs and arms. It's not something you get to see often in games, and getting to see it here is really damn nice. The variety of different vehicles in this game is pretty damn solid, and the fact that you have a garage early on allows you to create your own little car collection. Also, I do enjoy the car modification and weapon modification that we get access to. Although, in the case of weapons, I don't really understand why we need the level of extremity for customization that we have, but hey, nice to have it. Overall, my time with the game was very solid. I didn't run into any major performance issues. It wasn't flawless by any means. After 10 hours, I did run into a few glitches, and I do plan to put some more time in before I'm finished with this video. But it is important to note that there are some glitches that you will need to expect, and that's because it's an open world game, so the physics are going to bug out whether you like it or not. A nice little touch is the fact you can hear about your exploits on the radio. Well, at least for mainline missions. Early on, you'll find yourself chasing a convoy of stolen artifacts, among other things, but once you finish that mission and drive around with the public radio station on, you'll hear a news report about it. It really helps build out the world a little bit more here, since it can definitely feel a bit lifeless later on. Another thing I actually really enjoyed was the LARPing section. Granted, it did get a little bit old as it went, as I feel like it should have been a one and done, but hey, I enjoyed it the first time, it got a chuckle out of me. Something that falls in between the good and just okay to me is this game's OST. While the soundtrack itself has a wide variety on offer, and it is pretty excellent as you would expect from this series, its OST itself does feel a little uninspired at points. The main menu theme itself is easily an example of this, because I love how it starts, but eventually it just turns into a somewhat generic trap beat. It's not bad, it's functional, but it just doesn't really have the impact or kind of that hook to it that I would have hoped it would have. Moving into the okay parts of the game, this is where I'm going to find a lot of the game's core mechanics. The combat itself is just okay. It's not offensive, but it's lacking impact, especially in its hand-to-hand moments. Also, the weapon sounds are very thin. It just doesn't have that oomph that you would hope it would have. The game suffers from the major flaw of attempting to continue the series and its over-the-top insanity that we'd been used to by the time we got the 4th installment, instead of returning to a more baseline approach. And this is 100% personal taste preference on my end, but I do think it would have done the game a bigger service to return to something closer to the original game more so than where the series ended up. And that's not to say that the original was exactly that grounded. The voice acting itself is also serviceable here. Usually I try to be a lot more positive when it comes to voiced characters because I think it's a lot harder to voice a character and do a good job than people think. But here, some of these line deliveries just fall flat. It's not that they're voiced necessarily bad, but I think the direction might have been the issue here. There are also points as well when it comes to the voice acting where the mixing and lack of effects on the vocal lines just make it feel like a PS3 or Xbox 360 game. Everything feels like they've just recorded the lines in the booth, and that will do. Sadly, I would say a lot of the side hustles also fall under the just okay section as well. And this is a series that is known for having great side missions for you to partake in. However, here I found myself just doing them once and being like, yep, that's done, that's enough for me. Whereas in previous games, especially in 2, the insurance fraud minigame is impossible to beat. That is one of the most entertaining things I've ever done in a game. The driving is also fairly average. Some cars can feel a little too heavy for their own good, whereas others feel like they weigh nothing. And don't get me wrong, it is nice to have a game that lets you drive a car that controls really well with mouse and keyboard, but I do find its drifting mechanic to be a little bit too touchy and a little bit too in demand at certain points when it comes to making certain turns. In saying this though, on controller it's definitely a lot better. That's just me when I'm playing with mouse and keyboard. The vehicle combat is something I also don't find myself myself loving, but I also don't find myself hating it. If I can avoid it, I usually would, but if I had to partake in it, I didn't feel a sense of dread. It's a perfectly functional system, and I don't mind being able to ram cars with a short little dash move that the car can do, but it also feels kind of pointless when I could just drive straight into them. I do enjoy hopping on the roof to shoot, but considering I can't control the car anymore, this felt stupid. I'd just stop the car, get out, and then fight. It just seems like a little bit of a clash as to what they were doing. It seems like they were going for a little bit of style over substance here. Before getting into the bad though, I do have one thing that I really want to talk about, and that's this game's auto aim. It's on by default, which is fine, pretty standard for most games. But after I turned it off, whenever I would zoom in with my weapons to have a more precise aim, it would auto lock onto enemies. Now, it might not technically mean to be an auto aim, but this game just has one on by default at all times. It doesn't happen every time, but it happened enough that it actually started to piss me off because I couldn't aim where I wanted. It doesn't ruin the entire experience at all, but it definitely does lead to a source of frustration. And now for the bad. Not everything in this game is as bad as you might expect, especially given its rough launch, but there are some things they just couldn't fix. Firstly, the writing. The game's dialogue feels really unnatural and can be really damn cringe-inducing at points. It's not to say it's 100% unredeemable, and there are times that definitely got a chuckle out of me, but there are also times that got more of a pity laugh than anything. It suffers from what I want to call Borderlands-itis. In its attempt to be funny, it tries way too hard, and it really shows. With a more meme-ish style of comedy instead of traditional comedic stylings, it makes the game feel out of date, even though it's only a couple of years old. The internet is notorious for moving on from memes at a rapid pace, so it just seems like an odd choice to use them here. Characters find themselves as nothing more than stereotypes, and look, I understand this is a series as a whole that's always done that, but they had a chance to reinvigorate this much beloved series here and do something more with it. Look at Grand Theft Auto. They evolved with the games like 4 and 5. They never really stagnated in doing the same thing, at least after the PS2 era. And sure, we might look at something like San Andreas with big hearts in our eyes, unless it's the definitive edition.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Hey, look at that, I can still foreshadow. But Grand Theft Auto stayed very relevant because it did evolve, and Saints Row sadly just hasn't done that. I also found the pacing, especially at the start of the game, to be really damn slow and frustrating. You get a minute of gameplay, then cutscene, followed by maybe 30 seconds of gameplay, then another cutscene, and a lot of turret sections. It just doesn't really feel great to play, at least in the beginning. Now it does get better, but at least at the start, it's going to put people off. It sadly comes off feeling as a lesser version of previous entries within the franchise, making it hard to be a game that I would straight up recommend, unless you're already a fan. And look, you might want a GTA style game to play without it being GTA, but this might not necessarily be the one to go for. If you have it already, I'd say it's worth it, but is it something I would go out of my way to get? Not really. Sadly, Volition, the developers behind this game, were shut down, and that actually makes me incredibly sad because I think there are some things they've done well here, and if they were allowed to do a follow-up, they might have been able to do something a bit better after learning their lessons from the first. It's no 10 out of 10 game. It might be closer to a 5 to be honest, it's just there. But there are definitely worse games you could play. So with that, lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, it brings us to the end of another video. I hope you enjoyed this taking out the trash on Saints Row. I feel like I was a little more harsh than I typically am, and I do think the game is worth playing, but maybe only if you already own it, or if you have a friend that might own a copy that you can borrow. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting that like button. If you want to go that extra step, you can hit the subscribe button, and if you want to go that extra mile, you can support me on Ko-fi from just $1 a month, like these lovely people here. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. Bye.